You're sitting on the crinkly paper of the exam table, waiting for the doctor, and running through the mental list of habits you might have to give up. For a lot of us, the biggest fear is hearing that our daily, non-negotiable cups of coffee are bad for our blood pressure or our heart. But medical science has actually spent the last few decades building a solid defense for your morning brew. The data consistently shows that moderate coffee consumption is packed with antioxidants and linked to a lower risk of chronic diseases. You breathe a sigh of relief. However, a massive analysis published in the European Heart Journal in February 2025 suggests that the beverage's effect on your lifespan depends entirely on the clock. While coffee itself is healthy, most of us are misaligning it with our biology. This research utilized the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey to track the minute-by-minute dietary patterns and survival records of over 40,000 adults following their specific outcomes for a median of nearly 10 years. The data shows that protecting your heart requires no reduction in how much coffee you enjoy. It simply requires synchronizing your caffeine intake with your body's internal clock. This chart illustrates the risk of cardiovascular death based on daily coffee habits. When researchers isolated the people who drank coffee continuously from morning through the afternoon and evening, they saw something surprising. Compared to people who drank zero coffee, the all-day drinker group had absolutely no reduction in mortality risk, a flat 0% change. But look at what happens when the data isolates the morning-only drinkers, those who finished their last cup before noon. That specific group experienced a massive 31% lower risk of dying from cardiovascular disease compared to the non-drinkers. The benefits extended beyond the heart, too. This morning-restricted group also showed a 16% lower risk of dying from any cause whatsoever over the 10-year tracking period. Pouring cup after cup without a schedule effectively neutralizes the very compounds that make the beverage healthy. The heart is only protected when that caffeine hits your system during a highly specific biological window. To understand why timing dictates toxicity, imagine your body's circadian rhythm as a massive corporate office building. When you wake up, the building opens for the day. This initiates a surge in your sympathetic nervous system, the biological wiring responsible for your fight or flight responses and general alertness. It boots up exactly like an office building suddenly surging with electricity as thousands of workers rush through the doors. All that sudden morning activity generates biological friction. Because your system is working so hard to transition from sleep to high-alert waking hours, it naturally produces a daily peak in dangerous cardiovascular inflammation markers. This is where your coffee enters the building. Coffee beans are loaded with anti-inflammatory compounds. When you drink a cup in the morning, you are sending an elite cleaning crew straight into the system precisely when the building is at its absolute messiest and most chaotic. The timing creates maximum efficiency. The beverage deploys a targeted anti-inflammatory shield that intercepts and neutralizes the specific chemical stressors attacking your cardiovascular system during its most vulnerable hours. Now, shift the timeline forward to 5 in the afternoon. The biological office is attempting to dim the lights, lock the main doors, and power down the servers for the evening. Your brain starts producing melatonin, a hormone that acts as the body's natural shutdown signal. It tells your blood vessels to relax, lowering your blood pressure and preparing your heart for a period of deep recovery. Taking a sip of coffee now is the biological equivalent of blaring a fire alarm in that quiet, closing building. The caffeine directly suppresses your melatonin production and violently disrupts the wind-down routine. Instead of resting, your heart rate remains elevated and your blood pressure stays high well into the night, forcing your cardiovascular system to work overtime. Repeating this cycle day after day creates a state of chronic disruption. Over the years, this lack of recovery completely erases any anti-inflammatory benefits you gained from your morning routine, leaving your heart exposed and vulnerable to disease. Dr. Lu Qi, the lead researcher on this study from Tulane University, extracted a remarkably practical finding from this data regarding exactly how much coffee we're allowed to have. Often, nutritional studies offer a catch. The health benefits only apply if you restrict your intake to a single tiny cup. This graph from the study's structured abstract breaks down the dose-response relationship. It shows that the heavy morning drinkers, participants consuming more than 3 cups, still secured that exact same 31% reduction in cardiovascular risk, as long as they stopped drinking before the afternoon. The data points to a clear, liberating conclusion. Cardiovascular protection is dictated far more by the hour you stop drinking than by the volume of coffee you pour into your mug. This translates to one highly actionable rule for your routine tomorrow. Set a strict coffee curfew. For most people, a hard cutoff at noon aligns perfectly with the body's natural shift from alert functioning to evening wind-down. As health interventions go, it is remarkably forgiving. It requires no calorie counting, no restrictive diets, and zero pressure to give up your favorite morning ritual. The next time you're sitting on that crinkly exam table, you don't need to feel anxious when the doctor asks about your caffeine intake. You can answer with confidence. By simply respecting your biological clock, you stop forcing your cardiovascular system to fight against itself. You transform what feels like a guilty daily pleasure into a targeted, time-released medicine for your heart.